I used to think silence in a relationship meant comfort. Two people so in sync, words weren't needed. But now, in our house, silence meant something else. It wasn't comfort. It was distance. Reed sat across from me at dinner, scrolling through emails on his phone. The clinking of my fork against the plate felt like the loudest sound in the room. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like I hadn't rehearsed the question in my head 10 times. He nodded without looking up.
"Busy."
"Yours?" I stared at him for a second too long. It was okay. That was it. That's how most of our conversations had become. Brief, safe, empty. We were married for 5 years. And it wasn't that Reed had changed into someone unkind or cold. He was still himself, logical, responsible, calm. But maybe that was the problem. He hadn't changed and I had. I cleaned up the dishes that night alone. He was already back in his office, headphones in, deep into spreadsheets and late-night meetings. I stood by the kitchen sink and stared out at the night sky. The silence crept in again. That weekend, I went to an art exhibit downtown. I needed air, color, emotion, something not pixelated or routine. Reed declined the invitation, citing deadlines. That's when I saw him. Nico. He stood beside a sculpture that twisted upward like a windstorm frozen in time. He hadn't changed much, still wore those soft, layered earth-tone shirts, sleeves rolled up, hair a little messier than intentional. He looked like he lived in paint and jazz. "Isla?" I turned, stunned. "Nico? God, it's been, 7 years?" "Too long," he said, grinning. "You look peaceful." I laughed. Liar. We walked through the exhibit together, and I realized how easily our conversation flowed. He didn't ask about Reed. I didn't offer. We talked about college memories, how we used to sneak into empty auditoriums just to listen to the echo of our laughter. How he once painted an entire mural of my silhouette on his dorm wall, then painted over it before moving out. "You still painting?" I asked. He nodded. "And sculpting now. I got my own studio." "That's incredible. You always said I would do something reckless with my life. You always said you would drag me into it." He smirked. "Still willing." My breath caught. I looked away, pretending to study a canvas. Depends on the type of reckless. He didn't press. But the tension hung there, barely spoken, like the pause between two musical notes that carry more emotion than sound itself. When I got home that evening, Reed was asleep on the couch, TV still playing some documentary about market trends. I picked up his laptop and placed it on the table, covering him with a blanket. His face looked peaceful in sleep, unaware. But inside me, something stirred. A memory, a longing, a contrast. My phone buzzed just past midnight. "Nico, you didn't seem happy, Isla. Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a full minute, my fingers trembling. No one had asked me that in years, and actually waited for an honest answer. I typed, "No, I'm not." Then I stared again. I could delete it. I could ignore it. Pretend nothing ever happened. Bury the feeling deep under dishes and work and routine. But something in me needed to be heard, to be felt, to be seen. I hit send. There it was. A small message. A tiny rebellion. But it felt like the start of something I couldn't take back. The next few days were filled with guilt shadowed by anticipation. Nico and I didn't talk much after that, but something had shifted. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him. When it wasn't, a strange emptiness filled my chest. One afternoon, he finally messaged, "Come by the studio sometime. No pressure. Just art." No pressure. Just art. But I already knew it wasn't going to be just that. Not anymore. Not after the way he looked at me. Not with lust, but with recognition. The kind of gaze that says, "I remember who you were before you became what you had to be." And that was more dangerous than anything else. I told myself it was harmless. That stepping into Nico's studio didn't mean anything. Artists had open studios all the time. Friends visited. People appreciated sculptures and left. That was the story I repeated in my head as I parked outside his building one gray afternoon, my heart pounding like I was doing something illegal. The studio sat on the second floor of a converted warehouse. The walls were covered in texture, paint drips, sketches, scattered brushes, cloths stained with color. A window was cracked open, letting in the cold breeze and the scent of linseed oil and earth. Nico greeted me with a smile, soft and unreadable. "You came." I nodded. I said I would. I wasn't sure. I stepped in, trying to keep my voice steady. "Show me what you've been working on." He led me to the far corner, where a cloth covered something tall. With a slow gesture, he pulled the sheet down. Beneath it stood a sculpture, rough marble, shaped like a woman turning her head away, her hand half reaching forward. Raw, powerful, unfinished. "She looks like she's leaving something behind," I whispered. "She is," he said. "She's reaching for something ahead, but still tied to the past." "Is that me?" He didn't answer, just looked at me. And in his eyes, I felt something unspoken settle between us. We sat on the old leather couch near the window, sipping coffee he'd brewed himself. For a while, we talked about small things, what he was reading, what I was watching lately, how different life felt since we last saw each other. But there was a tension underneath every laugh, every glance. The pauses between words held more weight than the words themselves. "Do you ever think about how it might have been if we hadn't lost touch?" he asked, voice quiet. "All the time," I admitted. He leaned forward. "And now, I'm married." "That's not what I asked." I looked at him, caught in the gravity of a question that wasn't innocent anymore. My phone buzzed. A message from Reed. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Malicks tomorrow. Wear the blue dress. You look good in that." I stared at it. "No, I miss you. No, how are you?" Just a reminder. Like a meeting. I put the phone face down on the table. Nico reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered near my cheek. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I didn't. The first kiss wasn't hurried. It was soft. Slow. His lips hovered before they touched mine, like he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. Everything in me had been craving this kind of attention, delicate, deliberate, alive. We moved like people who had waited too long, not for passion, but for something real. I didn't feel like I was cheating. I felt like I was waking up. He held me like I mattered, like he had memorized every curve, every breath, every hesitation. His touch didn't rush or claim. It invited. It lingered. I gasped when his hand slid down my arm, when his lips traced the hollow beneath my collarbone. It wasn't wild. It wasn't fast. It was slower, deeper, and too much for me. We didn't speak during or after. The only sounds were our breathing, the quiet wind from the open window, and the beat of something ancient and undeniable inside my chest. Wrapped in the aftermath, I lay there tangled in sheets I didn't recognize, but somehow felt safe in. Nico's arm rested over my side, fingers splayed lightly across my stomach. I stared at the ceiling, guilt and pleasure fighting for control inside me. I'd crossed the line. There was no undoing it. No way to rationalize this as a mistake or an accident. I had wanted it, invited it, and I couldn't even pretend otherwise. I sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around me. "You okay?" he asked, half asleep. "I don't know." He didn't push. He just nodded. I got dressed in silence, trying not to look in the mirror. My face looked unfamiliar, flushed, alive, haunted. He walked me to the door. "Are you going to pretend this didn't happen?" he asked gently. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, I whispered, "Don't text me tonight." He nodded once, as if he understood. As I walked down the staircase and back into the cold afternoon, I felt my phone vibrate again. A message from Reed. "Got promoted today. Let's celebrate this weekend." I stared at the screen, then tucked the phone in my purse without responding. Because I had just celebrated something else. And I wasn't sure what that made me anymore. The guilt didn't hit me like thunder. It arrived quietly, slowly, like fog rolling in at dawn. One moment I was walking through my front door, and the next I was surrounded by it, guilt in the walls, guilt in my husband's eyes when he smiled at me without knowing. Reed was in the kitchen, holding a small cake box. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said. "You've been quiet lately. Figured something sweet might help." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat ached with the weight of what I couldn't say. He handed me a plate. "Strawberry. Your favorite." I wanted to cry. Not because of what I had done, but because it had taken this, me stepping outside our marriage, for him to notice my silence. That night, I lay in bed beside him. He turned to me, his hand gently resting on my hip beneath the covers. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just tired," I lied. But I wasn't tired. I was full. Full of questions. Full of longing. Full of a moment I wasn't supposed to have lived. Reed kissed my shoulder and pulled me close. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but behind them played flashes of Nico, his hands, his breath, the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered in a room full of light. I hadn't replied to Nico's message. He had sent just one. "You don't have to explain. Just don't disappear again." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what I wanted. Every time I opened my phone, I hovered over his name, then locked the screen again. It was easier to pretend nothing had changed, to live the lie a little longer. But I knew something had shifted. Even Reed could feel it. At dinner the next evening, he watched me carefully. "You seem different lately. Distant." "I'm fine," I said too quickly. "Is there someone else?" he asked bluntly. My fork froze midair. "What?" "I don't mean to accuse. I know I haven't been here. Not the way I should have. I just don't want to lose you." I put the fork down. My stomach turned. I could have confessed. Right there. Freed myself from the weight of secrets. Maybe we could have started over. Maybe we could have broken completely. But I didn't. "No," I whispered. "There's no one else." He let out a breath. "Okay. I believe you." And just like that, I had lied again. After he went to bed, I sat by the window for hours, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. I thought about Nico, about the way he had made me feel, wanted, alive, understood, but also about how fleeting it was. A moment of escape, yes, but not a solution, not love. I opened Nico's message again. This time, I didn't hesitate. "I can't do this," I typed. "I thought I could live with it, but I can't. I'll always remember that night, but it has to stay in the past." I hit send before I could change my mind. I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No reply. Maybe that was his answer. The next day, I deleted his contact. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. And I knew if I didn't create distance now, I'd lose whatever version of myself I still respected. Reed came home early that evening. We cooked together, awkwardly, like strangers relearning an old dance. We didn't talk about what had been said, or what hadn't. At bedtime, he wrapped his arms around me again. It felt unfamiliar, but I didn't pull away. Healing doesn't start with forgetting. It starts with facing the cracks and deciding whether to fill them, or let the whole thing break. Weeks passed. I visited the art exhibit again. Alone. Nico's studio had a sign on the door. Closed for a while, creating in solitude. I didn't try to reach out. Instead, I stood in front of his sculpture, the unfinished woman with her hand half reaching forward. And I whispered to her like she could hear me, "You're not the only one torn between the past and the future." When I got home, Reed was waiting on the couch with 2 mugs of tea. He patted the seat next to him. "Stay," he said. "Talk to me." This time, I sat. Not because I was sure of anything, but because, finally, I was willing to start again. The story didn't end with passion. It ended with truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it should have started in the first place.